Hi everybody, this is Donna Smith talking to you from my home in Denver, Colorado. I wish I was there in Northampton with you this weekend. Sorry that I can't be, but I've been struggling with some of my own health issues, as many of you already know. I won't go into great detail here, but I'm so sorry I'm not a part of this panel that's going on to talk about the future of single-payer work for PDA and for the movement in general. So I'm sure that Michael Leidy really brought you up to speed on what he sees going on in the future for single-payer work, and I probably won't enlighten you an awful lot beyond what Michael had to say, but I wanted to discuss a little bit of what my view is as the chair of the Healthcare Not Warfare campaign. First of all, I really don't believe, and I say this to audiences all the time, that the work on the national level, on national single-payer legislation, is really where the energy and the drive needs to go right at the moment. I think the potential to move national single-payer legislation is really very slight right now. By any political scenario you play out between now and really 2018 or even 2020, there isn't going to be a lot of energy either in the Congress or in the administrative branch in the presidency to really move a major healthcare overhaul, or certainly single payer, anytime soon. Democrat, Republican, the energy to do that isn't there, and the political will to do it isn't there on the part of the politicians. Now, could that change because of some catastrophic public outcry for change, or some cost catastrophe, or something that we don't anticipate now? I suppose so, but the interests that we all know are so powerful in terms of the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry, not to mention the strong conservative bent that really would like us to throw out all kinds of healthcare reform except those that really protect market-based interests. I just don't see the national energy being there to overcome some of those obstacles. Now, that isn't to say we shouldn't support certainly Bernie Sanders' work on the American Health Security Act of 2013, Senate Bill 1782. I think we really should be as supportive as we can be of Senator Sanders, and certainly I've always wanted us to put as much energy on the Senate side as we have put on the House side, just to really get Senator Sanders at least one, if not more, co-sponsors for the work that he does. He cannot be the only voice really standing for healthcare as a human right and advancing single payer in the United States Senate, or we really are doomed not to accomplish that on the national level for the foreseeable future. We really need to support what Senator Sanders has done. He is going to have a hearing coming up on May 21st, where he's going to talk about the American Health Security Act, and because that bill really deals with state-administered, a national single payer, but it's administered state by state, I think it's really important for states that are advancing work on single-payer bills, state-based bills, to pay attention to that hearing, to weigh in heavily with written testimony through his office. And as many of you know, Tim worked really hard in the last year to include Senator Sanders' staff in the progressive roundtables that were held in Washington, D.C. We really pushed hard through every avenue we could in PDA to start advancing work on that Senate side, and Andrea has done a good deal of lobbying on the Senate side as well on behalf of PDA. So it's important to keep that structure going and to keep that energy going. On the House side, I think it's very difficult under most scenarios to imagine that we could get more co-sponsors on H.R. 676 than there were in the years leading up to the passage of the Affordable Care Act. You know, we had 95 or 96 co-sponsors before the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010, and really it's going to be really hard to get to that level again in the future. The House, certainly under Republican operation, is not going to put any energy to single payer or to more progressive health reform. Look at how many times they've voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, even though most of us who support single payer certainly know that the Affordable Care Act is not progressive legislation as we would like to see it. Certainly the people in the Republican Party see this as close to socialism and the government forcing them to have health care. So I don't think we're going to get that support for H.R. 676 that's been there in the past. Having said that, again, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't support single-payer legislation on the House side. Both H.R. 676 and Jim McDermott's H.R. 1200 that has been introduced every congressional schedule since before H.R. 676 really became the bill that people were backing in the single-payer movement. So we really need to keep that pressure on in Congress, both sides, House and Senate, but national is not where we have the greatest potential of our effort paying off in a big way. I always applauded PDA and really supported our creation of the One Payer States group that formed in Wayne, Pennsylvania at a regional PDA meeting on April 10th of 2010. We really formed it because there was a thirst and a hunger for those working on state-based legislation to be able to come together and share what things were working, what things were not working to advance state-based single-payer legislation, and we've continued to keep that network going. Is it always made up of those people who are at the very top of the single-payer game in their individual states? No. It isn't. Sometimes those folks are not participating as much as we would like them to, but often they are participating. We've got states everywhere from Maine to Hawaii to Washington State, and we're just very proud of the work that group has done together, and continuing phone calls that have relevant material for state-based single-payer work that goes on. States all over the country are doing different things related to single-payer legislation. Most of the time you're not going to hear an awful lot about what's going on unless you're connected with either PDA, one-payer states. Healthcare Now has put out some good information on state-based work, and states are doing a variety of things. Some are following the more traditional legislative route. For instance, New York State has done a tremendous job of advancing their bill in their legislature, and New York's had a bill for the longest of any of the states. States like Colorado and California really envision having to go to the ballot to get voter support for single-payer legislation, in part because we have a legal obligation to go to our voters with various tax structures and funding mechanisms that would really help us advance single-payer bills in our states. And other states like New Mexico, where they're working on the New Mexico Health Security Act, and Illinois, and Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and certainly Vermont. All of these states have a different level and a different vision of how state legislation for single-payer would move forward in their states. And it's where you can have a lot of impact as an activist, and really where you can help your PDA chapter have some energy and have some focus for single-payer work, along with supporting whatever national effort we have for the Healthcare Not Warfare campaign. So I hope that, having said that you'll look forward to helping PDA as we go forward keep the pressure on single-payer. PDA has continued to be one of the leading groups really supporting single-payer work stoically and without equivocation as the way that we have to move forward on health care. And we continue to make the point that as long as there is so much spending on things that are not creating peaceful things in our society and in our world, we're spending money on war and we're spending money on weapons to destroy, and we're not spending what we need to spend in the way we need to spend it on bringing healthcare as a human right to every person who lives in the United States and needs that care. So I'm anxious to watch the recording of the panel. I'm sorry I'm not there, and thank you, Michael, for facilitating this panel, and thank you all for listening to it, and I'll look forward to joining you the very next time PDA is together and sharing with you the energy for single-payer work to make one single standard of care, of high-quality care for everybody in this country, a reality. Thanks much, and see you soon. Healthcare, not warfare. Healthcare, not warfare.